Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is stand still. A trembling hand reaches out on live television. A wide smile, an open palm. But the old champion sitting across the stage looks at that hand and slowly shakes his head. He doesn't take it. The audience gasps. The young fighter's smile falls. His hand hangs in the air for 5 long seconds. Producers panic. Cameramen freeze. This is New York, 1989. The old champion is Muhammad Ali. The young man left standing is Mike Tyson, the most feared man on the planet. Weeks earlier, Tyson told a reporter he could have knocked Ali out. Ali took it as disrespect. Now every person in that studio expects Tyson to erupt. Instead, something happens that no one sees coming. Something that leaves the entire room in tears. What did Tyson say that left the studio frozen? Subscribe for more stories. Now, to understand what happened that night, you need to understand the room. And more importantly, you need to understand the 2 men inside it. The year is 1989. The studio is in Manhattan. A late-night special. Big budget. The kind of show where every seat in the audience costs a favor. The producers had been working on this moment for over a year. Getting Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson in the same room on the same stage on live television. They called it a meeting of legends. Old king, new king. Past and present. They thought it would be beautiful. Now here's the thing. Mike Tyson in 1989 was not the Mike Tyson people know today. Today, people see an older man. A man who has made peace with himself. A man who talks about his pigeons, cries openly in interviews, and laughs about the chaos of his younger years. But in 1989, none of that man existed yet. In 1989, Mike Tyson was the most dangerous human being walking the earth. And that is not an exaggeration. He was 22 years old, undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. He had 37 professional fights and 37 wins. Most of them didn't go past the second round. He didn't just beat men. He broke them. He walked into the ring with no robe, no socks, black trunks, black shoes, and a stare that made grown men forget their training. Fighters who had been brave their entire lives suddenly looked like children. That was the effect Tyson had. He hit so hard that referees would step in not because a man was knocked down, but because they were afraid of what would happen if Tyson hit him again. Believe me, there is no fighter before or since who carried that kind of terror into a ring. And off the ring it was worse. The stories were everywhere. Bar fights, street confrontations, hotel lobbies. Tyson's temper was a lit fuse attached to dynamite, and nobody ever knew how long the fuse was. Sometimes it was long. Sometimes it wasn't there at all. So that's the man standing on one side of the stage. 22. Undefeated. Explosive. Unstoppable. Now let's talk about the man on the other side. Muhammad Ali in 1989 was 47 years old. He had been retired from boxing for nearly a decade. And he was sick. Parkinson's disease had already started doing what no fighter ever could. It slowed him down. It stole his voice. The man who once talked faster than any heavyweight in history now sometimes struggled to finish a sentence. His hands trembled. His movements were careful and deliberate. Getting out of a chair took effort. But here is what people got wrong about Ali in those years. They saw the trembling and they assumed the man was gone. That was a mistake. Ali's body was failing, but his mind was a furnace. His eyes still moved like a young man's. He still watched everything. He still understood every room he walked into. And he still had the one thing that made him the greatest of all time. It wasn't his speed. It wasn't his jab. It was his pride. Ali's pride was the size of a cathedral. And nobody, not even time, not even disease, was going to shrink it. So when Tyson, weeks before this show, sat down with a reporter and said the words, "In my prime, I would have knocked Ali out," he didn't just make a prediction. He lit a match in a room full of gasoline. The quote spread everywhere. Newspapers, radio, television. Everyone had an opinion. Most people laughed it off. Young fighter talks tough. What else is new? But Ali didn't laugh. Ali read that quote, and something shifted behind his eyes. He didn't say anything publicly. He didn't need to. The people closest to him knew. They could see it. Ali was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that used to come right before he destroyed someone in the ring. And now, on this night in 1989, both men are in the same studio, under the same lights, breathing the same air. The producers are excited. The audience is buzzing. The cameras are rolling. Nobody in that room knows what is about to happen. But Ali does. He has known since the moment he agreed to do the show. This isn't an interview for him. This isn't entertainment. This is a lesson. And the whole world is about to watch him teach it. The show begins the way these things always do. The host walks out. Big smile. Big applause. He warms up the crowd with a few jokes, talks about what a historic night this is, and then introduces the guests. Ali comes out first. The audience stands. Every single person. It doesn't matter what generation they come from. When Muhammad Ali walks into a room, people rise. It's automatic. He moves slowly. A handler is near his elbow, but Ali waves him off. He crosses the stage on his own. He sits down. The crowd roars. Then Tyson's name is called. Now get this. When Tyson walks out, the energy changes. It doesn't just shift. Cracks. There is something about being in the same room as Mike Tyson in his prime that words cannot fully capture. The audience claps, but it's different. This nervous applause. The kind people give when they're excited and afraid at the same time. Tyson sits down across from Ali. He's wearing a dark suit. No jewelry. His hair is cut short. And he is smiling. A real smile. Not the kind he gave opponents at weigh-ins. This is the smile of a boy who is sitting across from his hero. Because that's what people forget. Tyson worshipped Ali. Not casually. Not the way fans admire athletes from a distance. Tyson studied Ali the way a student studies scripture. He watched every fight. He memorized every round. When Tyson was 13 years old, locked up in a juvenile detention center in upstate New York, the only thing on the wall of his cell was a picture of Muhammad Ali. That picture kept him alive. He said so himself years later. So when the host starts the interview and the conversation flows easily for the first few minutes, Tyson is relaxed. The place was closed. Lights off except for the kitchen. Two of his lieutenants sat across from him. Nobody was eating. Darius was 34. He had built his crew from nothing over 6 years. Ran a strip of territory from Austin to Garfield Park. Drugs. Guns. Some extortion. Nothing that would put him on the FBI's radar, but enough to keep 60 soldiers paid and loyal. He was smart, careful, and until tonight, he thought he had a handle on every variable in his world. Now here is the thing. Darius knew exactly who Steven Seagal was. Not from the news. Not from rumor. From his own uncle, who had done collections for the Castellano operation back in the 90s. His uncle had told him one story, just one, about a man who owed the Castellanos $50,000 and tried to skip town. They found him in Milwaukee. Seagal did not send anyone to handle it. He drove there himself, alone. The man paid every cent by sunrise. Darius's uncle never told him what happened in that room. He just said, "You never want that man to know your name." And now Seagal knew his name, because Darius had screamed it into the phone trying to save his boys. He had said his own name. "This is Darius. I run the West Side crew." He had panicked, handed over his identity like a business card at a funeral. So Darius had a choice. He could do nothing and hope Seagal let it slide. Or he could get ahead of it. He chose wrong. "We hit him first," Darius said. His lieutenants stared at him. One of them, a man called Terrell, shook his head. That man is connected to people we cannot touch. You go at him, every Italian crew in the city turns on us. We are done." Darius slammed the table. He is 68 years old. He is retired. He has no crew around him. No bodyguards. He lives alone in a 4-story building. We send 5 guys. Clean it up before sunrise. Nobody has to know. Terrell stood up. I am not a part of this. He walked out. Darius let him go. That was his second mistake. Letting a man who disagreed walk away with knowledge of the plan. By 4 in the morning, Darius had his team assembled. 5 men, armed. A stolen van. They had the address. They had a window. Seagal's building had no doorman. No security cameras in the lobby. Just a locked front door and a freight elevator that still worked. They moved at 4:30. Now, let me tell you what Seagal was doing at that exact moment. He was home, sitting in his kitchen, drinking black coffee. He had not gone to bed. Not because he was worried. Because he was thinking. He had been in the game long enough to know what came next. When you embarrass a young man in front of his crew, he does not sit with the shame. He acts. Fast. Stupid. But fast. Seagal picked up his phone. He made one call. It lasted 11 seconds. He said 4 words. Marco, I need eyes. Then he hung up. Marco Bianchi had been Seagal's driver for 9 years before the retirement. After that, he ran a private security firm downtown. Legal. Licensed. And still connected to every old Castellano loyalist in the Midwest. When Seagal called, Marco did not ask questions. He made 3 calls of his own within 2 minutes. By 4:15, Marco had a man parked across the street from Seagal's building. The man in the car saw the van pull up at 4:32. 5 men got out, masks on, guns out. They went through the service entrance. He called Marco. Marco called Seagal. Seagal was already standing by his kitchen counter. He listened. He said, "Let them come up. Now get this." Seagal was alone in that apartment. 68 years old. Bad knees. No weapon in his hand. 5 armed men were climbing 4 flights of stairs toward his door. And he told his people to let them come. This is the part where you need to understand something about Steven Seagal. He had survived 40 years in organized crime not because he was the toughest. Not because he was the most violent. But because he always controlled the room. Even when the room did not know it yet. The 5 men reached the 4th floor. They lined up outside his door. One of them tried the handle. It was unlocked. They pushed the door open. The apartment was dark. Quiet. The smell of black coffee in the air. They stepped inside one by one, guns raised, scanning left and right. The kitchen light was on. And there sat Seagal. At his small table, coffee cup in hand. Looking at them the way a man looks at rain through a window. Not surprised. Not angry. Just there. He set the cup down. He folded his hands. And he said, "Sit." Nobody moved. 5 armed men standing in a dead man's apartment. And not one of them could pull the trigger. Because something was wrong. Something they could feel but could not name. It was too easy. The door was unlocked. The light was on. He was sitting in the open. For 3 long seconds, nobody breathed. Then Seagal smiled. Just barely. And the room felt like it tilted. "Coffee is fresh," he said. "Help yourselves." And for a moment, just a moment, everything was still. Then a cell phone buzzed. Not one of theirs. Seagal's. It sat on the kitchen table next to his coffee cup. He glanced at the screen. His face changed. Not a lot, but enough. The comm cracked. Just for a second. And that second told every man in the room that something had shifted. Seagal picked up the phone. He listened for 10 seconds. He did not speak. Then he set it down and looked at the 5 men standing in his apartment. And when he spoke this time, his voice was different. Not cold anymore. Quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. "Your boss just made this personal," he said. "Here is what happened." While Darius sent 5 men to Seagal's apartment, he made another move. A move that changed everything. Darius had sent 2 of his guys to the diner on Halstead. The one Seagal went to every morning. The one run by a woman named Rosa Marchetti. She was 71 years old. She had known Seagal for 30 years. She had been Angela's closest friend. And Darius's men had walked in, smashed the front counter, and left a message spray-painted across the wall. Next time it is not the counter. That was the call. Marco telling Seagal what they did to Rosa's place. Now, believe me when I tell you this. Up to this point, Seagal had been handling this situation with restraint, patience, the way he always handled things. Give the other side room to back down. Let fear do the work. No blood if blood is not needed. But Rosa was family. Not by blood, by something stronger. She was the last living connection to Angela. Every Sunday for 8 years, Seagal had sat in that diner and eaten the same meal Angela used to order. Rosa never charged him. She never asked about the old days. She just brought his plate and sat with him for a few minutes. That was enough for both of them. Darius did not know that. He thought he was sending a message to a building. He was sending a message to a grave. Seagal stood up from the table. The 5 men in his apartment took a collective step back. Security guards near the stage shifted their weight forward. One of them put his hand on his radio. The producer backstage grabbed a phone, ready to cut the feed. Because this was Mike Tyson, the man who bit Evander Holyfield's ear off. The man who told Lennox Lewis he wanted to eat his children. The man whose rage was not a switch. It was a flood. And once it started, nothing could stop it. Tyson's jaw tightens. His chest rises. His nostrils flare. And for 3 seconds, maybe 4, the old Tyson is right there. Right at the surface. You can see it in his eyes. That darkness. That heat. The thing that made him a champion and destroyed everything else in his life. The host takes a half step backward. He doesn't even realize he's doing it. And then something breaks. Not in the room. In Tyson. His shoulders drop. Not like a man giving up. Like a man letting go. His hand, still hanging in the air, slowly lowers to his side. His chin dips toward his chest. And when he looks back up at Ali, his eyes are wet. Not angry. Not humiliated. Wet with something that nobody in that studio expected to see on the face of Mike Tyson. Grief. When he speaks, his voice is so small that the microphone barely catches it. The sound technician later said he had to push the levels higher than he ever had in 20 years of live television. Because the most terrifying man in boxing was now speaking in the voice of a child. I would never beat you, Muhammad. He stops. He swallows hard. His bottom lip is trembling. He doesn't try to hide it. He doesn't look away. He stands there in front of 200 people and millions more watching at home, and he lets them see him fall apart. I was just a scared little boy from Brownsville, he says. I watched you on a broken television in a house that didn't have heat, and I decided I wanted to live, not fight, live. Because before I saw you, I didn't think living was something people like me were allowed to do. A woman in the audience starts crying. Not quietly. The sound carries across the studio. Tyson's voice cracks, but he keeps going. You didn't just inspire me. You saved me. And if you never shake my hand for the rest of my life, I'll still love you. Because without you, there is no me. He stops talking. He doesn't move. He stands there with his arms at his sides, tears running down his face, completely exposed. No guard, no rage, no armor. Just a man standing in front of his hero, telling the truth. The studio is silent. Not the polite silence of an audience waiting for the next segment. The heavy silence of people witnessing something they were never supposed to see. Something private. Something sacred. Ali stares at Tyson. And now it is Ali who changes. The hardness in his face softens. The sharp look in his eyes turns into something else. His jaw relaxes. A single tear rolls down his left cheek. It moves slowly, following the lines that time and disease have carved into his skin. His right hand, the hand that shook the world, begins to rise. It trembles. Not from Parkinson's this time. From something deeper. It reaches out across the space between them. Ali takes Tyson's hand. He grips it. Not a handshake. A hold. The kind of grip a father uses when he's telling his son that everything is going to be all right. Then Ali pulls Tyson toward him. Tyson doesn't resist. He leans in, and Ali wraps his arms around the younger man. 2 champions. 2 generations. 2 men who spent their lives proving they were the strongest person in any room, holding each other on live television. Ali's mouth moves close to Tyson's ear. He whispers something. Nobody hears it. Not the audience. Not the host. Not the microphones. The words are meant for one person only. Tyson's body shakes. His face presses into Ali's shoulder. His hands grip the back of Ali's jacket like a drowning man gripping a lifeline. The sobs are not quiet. They are deep. The kind that come from a place most people spend their entire lives trying to keep locked shut. The audience is weeping. Not some of them. All of them. Grown men. Women. The host is standing off to the side with tears streaming down his face, making no attempt to continue the show. The cameras keep rolling because nobody has the presence of mind to stop them. 200 people in a Manhattan television studio, watching two fighters do the bravest thing either of them has ever done. Not throwing a punch. Letting one land. The show never officially ended. There was no closing segment. No final remarks from the host. No wrap-up. The producer eventually signaled for the cameras to stop, but it took a long time. Nobody wanted to be the person who interrupted what was happening on that stage. Ali and Tyson held each other for nearly a full minute. When they finally separated, Tyson wiped his face with both hands. He didn't look at the audience. He didn't look at the cameras. He looked at Ali. And Ali looked back at him with an expression that the people who were there would later describe in different ways. Some said it was pride. Some said it was forgiveness. Some said it was love. Maybe it was all three. Tyson returned to his chair. He sat down heavily, like a man who had just gone 12 rounds. Ali stayed in his seat. His handler came over and placed a hand on his shoulder, but Ali didn't acknowledge it. He was still looking at Tyson, still watching, but the sharpness was gone. The lesson was over. The studio cleared slowly. Audience members filed out in near silence. Some were still wiping their eyes. A few stopped near the stage, hoping to catch one more glimpse. Crew members moved equipment with the kind of quiet care that people use in hospitals and churches. Nobody was in a hurry. Nobody wanted to break whatever was still hanging in the air. Backstage, Tyson sat alone in his dressing room for 45 minutes. His manager came in twice. Both times Tyson told him to leave. When he finally came out, his eyes were red, but his face was still. A reporter was waiting in the hallway. She asked him what Ali had whispered. Tyson stopped walking. He looked at her, and he said very quietly, "That's between me and him." He walked away. In the days that followed, the clip aired everywhere. Every news broadcast, every sports show, every talk show. People who hadn't watched the original broadcast saw it replayed a dozen times. The image of Tyson's hand hanging in the air became one of the most recognized moments in television history. And the question of what Ali whispered became the kind of mystery that people never stop asking about. Over the years, interviewers tried everything. They asked Tyson directly. They asked him sideways. They brought it up casually. They ambushed him with it. Every single time, Tyson gave the same answer. His voice would change. It would get lower, softer. Sometimes it would crack. And he would say, "Those words are between me and God." Because that night, they were the same person. Nobody ever got more than that. Ali never spoke about it publicly either. As Parkinson's progressed, his public appearances became fewer. His words became rarer. But the people close to him said that whenever Tyson's name came up, Ali would nod slowly. And sometimes, very rarely, he would smile. They saw each other a handful of times after that night. Each time, the greeting was warm, quiet, respectful. The kind of bond that doesn't need constant contact to survive. The kind that was forged in a single moment and hardened into something permanent. Muhammad Ali passed away on June 3, 2016. He was 74 years old. The world mourned him as the greatest fighter who ever lived. But for one man, the grief was different, deeper, more personal. Tyson was asked to speak about Ali after his death. He tried. He sat in front of a camera, opened his mouth, and couldn't get through the first sentence. He covered his face. He shook his head. When he finally spoke, he didn't talk about boxing. He didn't talk about titles or rounds or knockouts. He said, "He made me believe I was worth something. Before him, Nobody ever told me that. And then he said something else. Something that brings us back to that night in 1989. Back to the studio. Back to the hand. Back to the whisper. People ask me what he said to me that night, Tyson said, his voice barely holding together. And I tell them it's between me and God. But I'll say this much. It was the first time in my life that someone I loved told me they were proud of me. He paused. And it was the last time I ever needed to hear it. Remember the opening? Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is stand still. That night, two men stood still. One refused to extend grace until it was earned. The other earned it not with his fists, but with his tears. And somewhere in the silence between them, in a whisper that the world will never hear, the old champion passed something to the young one that was worth more than any title. Not a belt, not a record, not a crown. Permission to be soft. In a world that only ever rewarded them for being hard.